Welcome to Grow Black Leaders,
your go-to source for all things leadership, growth, and development.
for Black leaders, by Black leaders. Let's grow. Welcome to the Grow Black Leaders podcast, where we exist to create a space, an ecosystem, a community where Black leaders can cultivate Black leaders. I'm Ronaldo.
And I'm Christian.
And we have the privilege of being your host. Listen, we understand that being a leader can be difficult, and being Black in leadership comes with its own nuances. So we're excited to help you to cultivate your leadership. I am pumped today. We have a phenomenal guest joining us, Patrice Washington. And some of you may know her already. Some of you may not. I'll let her introduce herself in a moment. But she leads the Redefining Wealth podcast, which is amazing. I mean, she like a podcast goat, all right? So we getting in this thing. She been in this thing. She's grown. She's done amazing things. I love her light, her inspiration, her love for people and helping to grow people. She and I, when we met, we got a chance to meet. We did a TV show together that we are currently in season 2 for, Opportunity Knocks. And when we first met, it was like, you know how you meet somebody and instantly, you know, like, you one of my people. Like, I don't care that you're miles away. We were having like this brother-sister vibe, like quickly. Like I've been knowing you for years. She's one of those people. And so we're so excited. I know you're pumped. This is one of the ones you were.
I am definitely pumped. And I was looking forward to this podcast. My very first time experiencing you was on the Opportunity Knock show. And I was like, oh my, I love it. Let me tell you, you were giving the people the business. I just love how you were just so honest. And another thing that I love is how you were just so authentic and just so transparent about your own journey of, you know, getting to a certain place financially, but rebuilding yourself and what it took to do that, and letting people know that, hey, if I went through that and I was able to come back from that, I am here to help you to do the same. So I felt like you had a perfect balance. It was like you loved on them, but you also let them know, listen, I don't know where you got that philosophy. I don't know why you thinking like that. So I absolutely love it. So I know that some of our audience, people out there, may not be familiar with who you are. So tell them, who is Patrice Washington?
And welcome, by the way.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. And yes, Ronaldo was like my brother from the moment we stepped on set. I'm like, you know, you just have that feeling like you're going to be friends with someone forever. So I'm so grateful for the invite. And to those of you who have never met me before, my name is Patrice Washington. Again, I would say, how do I want to introduce myself today? Well, first and foremost, as a Black leader raising a Black leader, I am the mother of a phenomenal 16-year-old girl, Reagan Washington, who is the light of my life. She is such a joy to parent, and she has really been, for me, the catalyst of why I show up in the world the way that I do. I've been known for over a decade as a financial expert. I was known as America's Money Maven in media for well over 10 years, 4 years on the Steve Harvey Show, answering people's personal finance questions, many times on Dr. Oz, regular on all types of media outlets. And I would say that I've just been a woman who was not only passionate about financial education, but really gained compassion when I went through my own financial loss. I started as a real estate and mortgage broker at 21 years old. I started during my senior year in college, really got into financial education, built a 7-figure real estate business with my former husband. We had 16 loan officers and real estate agents. We had 13 pieces of property personally. And I was 26 years old. You couldn't tell me I wasn't doing it, y'all. When I say I was doing it, you couldn't tell me I wasn't doing it until 2007, I took a fall down the stairs while I was 20 weeks pregnant, and it sent me into preterm labor. When I got to the hospital, they said, ma'am, I'm so sorry, but this baby's coming any minute. There's nothing we can do. And I did the only thing I knew to do. Money couldn't save my baby. You know, it came down to praying and asking other people to pray. And what was supposed to be the baby coming any minute turned into me staying in the hospital for 10 weeks on hospital bed rest. And while I was in the hospital in 2007, I was also watching the news every day where the banks that I work with were shutting down. So this was the beginning of the recession. It was the beginning of the real estate bubble bursting. And I did eventually have that baby at 30 weeks. She was born 3 pounds, but she was healthy. She stayed in the NICU for another 21 days or so. And when I left the hospital, I did leave with a healthy baby, but I also left with a healthy amount of medical debt to the tune of almost $400,000 because my health insurance had dropped me while I was in the hospital.
Wow.
The year before, I had a son prematurely as well. Same hospital, same floor, same doctor, who did not make it. And so just by virtue of it being so close together, I had exhausted my medical coverage. And so I went into the hospital having a 7-figure business, but within a year and a half of that experience, I was scraping up change to feed my new baby. And Ronaldo was such a blessing to even be filming and to meet the family that we met down in Lake Charles, Louisiana, because it was very full circle for me to be there, to be of service to a family that was in need, because I ended up fleeing Southern California and moving to Metairie, Louisiana in the midst of all of the things I was going on with me, 2008. And I remember being in the teeny tiny apartment that we lived in there in Louisiana, going to beg, for government assistance, getting on food stamps, getting anything I could qualify for, I was trying to get. And I just remember being in that space like, God, why me? How did I get here? I was a good person. I operate in integrity. I treat people well. I thought I was doing all of the right things. I was saving. I was doing all the things that I had learned to do in studying personal finance education. But 2 things about that season. Number one, it taught me that passion would not be enough for me to actually walk into my purpose. I was going to need compassion. And I recognized in that season, I didn't have compassion for people. I was very passionate about helping people. I've always been a good person. I've always been a nice person. But I feel like in looking back, I needed to have that experience because it was a setup for what I would be called to do. So when I go back to Louisiana now as a part of Opportunity Knocks, or I get to travel all over the country and speak and help people, the compassion that I have for people is from a very real place, because in that season, I was making a decision between, am I going to pay the light bill or am I going to get food today? Are we going to pay car insurance or are we going to try to piece together money for this rent? So that season taught me a lot about compassion. And it also taught me the true definition of wealth. I remember being on the bathroom floor one day, I had just chased the power man down in Louisiana and said, please turn the lights back on or my baby's milk is going to spoil. You have to help me. And the guy was like, they'll be back tomorrow. He took pity on me and did it. But I remember going back and looking in the mirror and just saying, God, this ain't it. I don't know what's going on here. And a still small voice said, get your Bible. And I landed on Proverbs 17:16. And it said, what good is money in the hands of a fool if they had no desire to seek wisdom? What good is money in the hands of a fool if they had no desire to seek wisdom? That's why my name on Instagram to this day is Seek Wisdom, because it taught me that I have been very smart. I graduated from the University of Southern California with honors. I passed my broker's test on the first try, which was unheard of at that time. It was all this stuff. I had a lot of knowledge and information, but I didn't necessarily have wisdom, which is when to apply the information that you have, how to apply it, how to use it in the real world. And so that season matured me quite a bit. It taught me what true wisdom was. It taught me what true wealth was, that it wasn't just money and material possessions, that wealth is really about the condition of well-being. And it also gave me compassion for people. So I thank God today for that time. But boy, was it a lot.
It sounds like it.
Oh my gosh. Yes. That was, first of all, just a phenomenal testimony of just the power of God. And I feel that many times God allows us to go through certain situations so that we can be a beacon of light and we can use it to minister to someone else. Even if you're not in ministry, I feel like you're doing ministry, even if you're not in ministry, and just going through what you went through, you had the knowledge and the passion, but you were missing the compassion. I love when you said that, because many times as leaders, I feel that we can be in the position of helping people or wanting to teach them how to lead, but not necessarily love people or love helping them. So, I absolutely love that. So I know that you have been in financial services for a long time and have been leading for a long time. What would you say is your very first leadership memory that you have?
My very first leadership memory, third grade. In third grade, I actually ran for student body treasurer and I didn't win.
Come on.
Yeah, I didn't win, which is so interesting. I remember my uncle made me, he was a great artist. He made this poster and it had me guarding like a little treasure chest or whatever. It was like this whole thing. I didn't win, but it didn't stop me from leading, if that makes sense. Like I still ended up on like the little student body cabinet and I still ended up running things. It was like I wasn't president, vice president, secretary, or treasurer, but somehow whatever role I had on that student body council, it ended up being by the end of the year, people were always asking me stuff. And I just remember feeling very at home in being able to recognize a problem and come up with solutions. And coincidentally, that's also the same year that I remember asking my dad, and my dad still tells this story to this day. He's 83 years old. My dad was an entrepreneur and I didn't know what that meant because he was available to come to things at school and my mom wasn't. And so I remember someone saying, does your dad have a job? And it was the first time it dawned on me. I was like, maybe he doesn't have a job. Maybe he does, because we didn't live in the same house. I was like, maybe he doesn't work. And he took me to Sizzler and we were having lunch and I was like, do you have a job? I was very concerned. He's like, I'm an entrepreneur. And I'm like, oh, okay. I still didn't quite understand what it meant, but something clicked in my head that when I become a parent, when I become a mom, I want to be an entrepreneur because I want to be able to govern my time. Like I knew that like instinctively, even in third grade. And so when I went to USC, I studied business, entrepreneurial studies, and I never did go get a job like coming out of college. I eventually got little jobs, as I was rebuilding, but in 42 years, I've probably fully worked for someone else, maybe 2.5 years out of the 42 years as an adult.
So you knew you were going to be a leader. And I love that you told that story, by the way, because most people who lead, when you ask them like their origin story of leadership, they go back to early parts of their childhood and they recognize exactly what you said. You like, now listen, I didn't win treasurer, but by the time I got in the room, I'm still leading. Like, and sometimes people are thinking when you are that person, they think like you're just barging in, like, let me be the leader. No, when something's on you to lead, it just naturally emerges in almost every circumstance, even when you aren't looking to, which is powerful. Look like you got something to add to that right there.
You know who helped me cultivate that though? Because especially as a woman, and I think especially as a Black woman, it is very easy for people to turn you into some type of bossy villain type of characteristic, right? Like some type of character in their mind. But it was my first grade teacher, Miss Boynton, who I will always give credit to. God rest her soul, who told me, I used to raise my hand all the time. I got it. First grade. I wanted to always say the answers. And she told me one day, Miss Cunningham, which was my maiden name, put your hand down. And I put my whole head down. I was so mad. I was like, I know the answers, And she kept me in for recess. And she said, I know you know the answers, but it's not good enough for you to just know. You have to be, she said, when you know something, you have to be willing to help your friends. And so she was the first person who taught me and cultivated this idea that if I was going to talk, I needed to do it, make it a purposeful endeavor. So she let me help my friends. But it started this idea that as soon as I learned something, I would like to go teach it. Like I wanted to go show people. And that started something in me. So I think that by third grade, I just was already so used to like helping and teaching. And I think that was the big thing about leadership. It's like people follow leaders who they know have the right motive and intention, and I think heart for it. And it really comes down to, I could see her enthusiasm and her true desire to help. So I will follow her. right? Which is the thing that makes you a leader. So while someone else had the title, they didn't necessarily have the tools or the confidence that I already had in third grade because I have been doing it since first grade. So, and that's so wild to even think about. But when I look back, yeah.
Which helps you to know, like, every phase of your journey could be impacting someone else. I mean, you're in first grade getting the earliest seeds that were necessary to cultivate who you would become as a leader. We should never really take any opportunity we have to either learn or to impart lightly. Because if I'm learning, I'm getting something that I may need for the next step in my journey, which we often don't know that we needed the previous step until we get to the next step, right? And then the second thing is, you never know who you're investing in. You know, you're giving information, but somebody's getting what they need to fuel their purpose long term. I have to bring you back because I know that there are leaders that are listening today that will be so impacted by the dialogue that it's very off script, but to me, it's one we have to have. You have been a leader who's been able to lead yourself through and above adversity in order to get where you've gotten it. And I was impacted, by the way. I just watched recently Tyler Perry's documentary. I don't know if you watched it.
I haven't seen it.
Like, Patrice, you got to watch it. It's a lot to take in to just see somebody go through so much adversity. At one point, he's talking about how he learned to float above it. And in having this dialogue, you know, as you were walking through your story, you walked through multiple things that happened. You know, before you had this big career helping people with their finances, you had a rock bottom moment. In the third grade, you're thinking, I'm about to be elected treasurer, and you're not, but you still find a way to lead. You know, I know recently you have navigated yourself through divorce, and you still out here like, listen, it's a new me. I'm about to get it, because you've trained yourself that adversity doesn't have the authority to dictate your trajectory. Something in you has found a way to emerge. It's almost like, and I know sometimes you like, listen, God, listen, I don't need adversity every time. Like, you could just really let it be easy. But something in you has learned to deal with this. And I was having this conversation with our family the other day, because something that was cultivated in us as kids was this resilience, and it's fueled what we do now as adults. And so I want to explore that dialogue for a moment, how you learn to cultivate a leadership of self through adversity to come and rise above that adversity to become all that you have become. And as you share that from a personal perspective, can you then turn that to the audience and help them to understand maybe some of the attributes that they should consider in leading themselves through adversity? Because some people quit when it gets hard.
Yeah.
Oh, this is such a great question. I've never been asked this in this way. The first thing that occurs to me is, for as long as I could remember, I have carried this idea that things are just not happening to me, that they're happening for me. Like, have just really, and I've told my clients before, it's a choice to believe this. It is a choice to believe that no matter what I'm experiencing, there is something I'm supposed to learn and good will come from it. I don't know when I'm going to be able to take that lesson and do something with it. I don't know how it's going to actually manifest and turn into something, but I choose to believe that it will. And because I choose to believe that it will, I rarely sit in things and stew in them and settle in them for long. And I think it is a practice to just train your mind, right? I don't want to make it sound like toxic positivity. So it's not like, you know, all these bad things are happening and I'm like, I'm fighting to see the good. It's not that. But it is a sense of understanding that I have to take personal responsibility. Even when I didn't do the thing, I still, for me, it's been a helpful practice to look at, was there anything that I could do different? Were there things that I could have done? And if so, how would I apply that moving forward? And so for me, it's always like, I just take the lesson and keep going. But it's this idea that nothing is happening to me, it happened for me. So even in the midst of divorce, which is like one of the most recent things. So I've now been separated for officially 2 years and divorced for a little over a year. I was married for 15 years. with the same person for almost 18 years. So that's my whole adult life, and even in the midst of all the things, I'm like, how do I desire to see this? Is this something that's happening to me or for me? I don't believe it's happening to me. I believe that it's happening for me. And it's a practice. Like, I literally write things down. I have a exercise that I wrote about in my last book. It's called What If versus What Is. And so when life is lifing and things are happening and there's certain adversity going on, I try to name the noise and do a brain dump. Because I think the other thing is we stay stuck in our heads and we don't just allow things, like, just write it out or say it out. I prefer to write it out because I like to reflect and look back and see what I was thinking at some particular time in the past. And so I write out on one side of the paper, what ifs, like, what are all the fears? What are all the things associated with this adversity that I'm going through? What am I making it mean? What stories am I telling myself about what somebody else is going to think? What stories am I telling myself about me? What stories am I telling myself about God? What stories am I? And I just try to write it all out. And then on the right side of the paper, I do what is, and what is the truth. And so, in the case of divorce, someone who's been in a long-term marriage, for example, or relationship, you may feel like, oh my gosh, well, who's going to love me? Like, I'm now entering my 40s as a single woman. This is not what I dreamed. This is not what I initially desired for myself. So, who's going to love me? Will I find someone else like that, I can have a deep connection with, and all these things. And on the right side, I was like, girl, you fine. What? Have you seen you? I started talking myself up. Have you seen you? You look good for 40. Like, what? Like, you're a wonderful person. I started to write affirmations for myself. I am loving. I am lovable. I am loved. I'm a phenomenal lover of people. Like, I started to reclaim and affirm all of those things. And that's a practice. I didn't call it the same thing, but it's a practice that I've had for many years now. Is like, okay, allow yourself to experience whatever you're experiencing because you're human. That's life. Feel your feelings, do the things, name the noise. But then also remember who you are. Remember all the things you've come through before. Remember what God has done before, which is why I like to journal and write things down. Because sometimes a big piece of it is being able to go back and see the last time you came through adversity. You've been through some stuff before and you're still here. And as my mentor, Steve Harvey, used to say, you've survived 100% of your worst days. You've already survived them. So the fact that you were here, the fact that I'm still sane, the fact that I'm not bitter, the fact that I still have joy, the fact that I can still, all these things, girl, you will be fine. And it's a practice that I've already taught my daughter. And I already see her in that ability to acknowledge what it is. We don't ignore, dismiss, diminish, deny, our feelings. But then also, okay, but yeah, God's already done a lot. So if I'm being honest, I already been through some things and I'm still standing. So this too shall pass. So I would say that's how I lead myself. Is I've always been a person who tries to create little exercises, and then I just stick to the ones that work.
A bit.
Oh, I love that too. You mentioned about you being reflective as a leader. And I feel like reflective leadership is so, so, so important because if you don't reflect on your experiences, you don't grow from them. And I loved how you talked about how when you reflected on them, you took from them to know what you need to do better the next time or what you learned from them. I feel that many times we can be so busy with going, that we don't take that moment to reflect on how things can be better or what we can do to change things the next time. And just so many things that you mentioned about the exercise, about you really just doing a brain dump and getting everything out of your mind that you're thinking about. Because I feel that as people, we can live in our head so much. And living in our head can cause us not to take action. But I love that it's like you put those things down. You didn't allow them to stay in your head. You put them down so that you can actually deal with what it is you're thinking and not just try to suppress it or smother it, but actually put it down and gave an opposing perspective to it as well. But I want to take you back to something that you said about being a woman in leadership, and especially a Black woman in leadership, because I feel like that's the unique experience all in itself, being a Black woman, and how many times Black women can be portrayed as, you said like bossy or either like the angry Black woman.
Black woman.
So I wanted to ask you, how have you navigated that? How have you navigated being a Black woman in the space that you're in and been able to overcome and still be able to...
And being the boss chick.
Yeah. Still being able to do your thing in spite of what people may try to put on you as far as their perspective.
I would say that for the most part, I've continued to just work on myself, meaning I recognize that it's not about trying to change other people's perception of me. It's not about trying to get agreements. It's not about trying to get validation, from a consensus of people. It has really been, for me, rooted in practicing radical honesty, because as long as I'm being honest and I am skilled in my delivery, meaning I'm just telling the truth. So, but my attachment to how you perceive that is not my business. That's your business, right? So I have just learned, because I feel like early in my career, when you want to be chosen, right, by people, we kind of just, people do little microaggressions or they do little things and you're like, okay, all right, maybe they didn't know better, so I'm gonna give them a pass. Or, you're questioning yourself, like, is it me? Like, am I crazy? You're trying to call your friend. Yeah, like, am I tripping? You're trying to call your friend, see if it was just you, all those things. And I think with maturity and wisdom, and again, a self-love journey where you're like, no, what we're gonna do here, for me, it's been continuing to develop the practice of radical honesty and knowing that I have a right to honoring my feelings and my journey and what I know I bring to the table, and ultimately recognizing that no one person or opportunity is the source. All of these things are resources, but ultimately God is my source. And I feel like as long as I stay true and aligned to that, then I can stay true with other people about when something works for me or when it doesn't, and do it and leave them with their dignity, right? I think that as a leader, sometimes we have this idea, especially as a woman, that if I tell people the truth, they're going to be mad. They're not going to like me. It's going to turn into something. And we create all of these stories because we think that truth means nasty, or we think that truth means we have to become the villain, or truth means... I am at this stage in my life, I'm 42 years old now. I'm just not about to play with people, Christian. I'm just not about to play with them. And I'm like, as a leader, whether it's with a team member or a client, or, client being like B2C, like my clients, or also just like corporations or brands that hire me to do things, having my own values in place and being more concerned with sticking to my core values than I am to whether you like me or not, really is the heart and foundation of how I operate these days. And I would say for the last several years, it's just the practice of radical honesty and knowing that I can tell you the truth and leave you with your dignity, but I'm not going to betray myself to make you feel like, like I'm nice or agreeable. I am kind. I'm gracious. I've always been a good person, and that is what it is. But, I've learned in this space that the only people who are upset when you are able to clearly articulate your boundaries are those who are wishing you didn't have any. And they benefited from you not having any.
Come on. And I love that you said, when you don't practice the radical honesty, you didn't say it just this way, but this is what you said, you betray yourself.
Yeah.
Like, I think that people don't consider that in order to give you what you need to feel comfortable, sometimes I betray myself, and we can't do that. I remember that whole journey professionally. Yeah. Like, I had this moment where in 2017, I was in my second role as CEO, and I felt that a lot of my journey had come through assimilation. And I didn't want to do it anymore. Like, I woke up one day and I said, I'm Black. I'm going to be Black. I'm black every time I open my eyes. I'm blackity black, black, black. Right. And we have a thing because I know people listening probably like, people come in and they listen from all different walks of life. I had somebody ask me one day, like, explain to me what I'm black and I'm proud means. Like, I feel that means that you're pushing me out. I'm like, no, that means that there's something about who I am that I take joy in, that I have a confidence. Yes, black and proud. Like, I really am proud to be black and I love it. I love this also. And I'm like, I don't know if you've led a conversation on this, but if not, please do, because I'm certain our listeners would love to hear you talk longer about radical honesty. Yeah, I love that. I think that's so, and I love the word radical in front of it because I feel that that's where people struggle a lot. They struggle to tell the truth. They struggle to present their true selves. And in leadership, the strongest leaders emerge because they're able to do so. I tell people, if you want to be in somebody's executive suite, or even if you want to rise to the level of entrepreneurship that you have to, one, have a spine, and you have to be able to be in conversations where a healthy dissent is ongoing. So people do disagree with you. Yeah. You're not going to wear your feelings, on your sleeve or on your shoulders, whatever way you say it. You're going to make sure that you continue to present your ideas and your truth. So that radical honesty, I don't know if you have a dialogue about that somewhere else, but you should, okay? Because some people, wouldn't you agree?
I agree. I love the radical honesty because I can be honest about who I am and still be kind and still be nice and not feel like I have to choose one or the other.
Yes.
I absolutely love that. And I feel that many people would be so much happier if they practice radical honesty and knowing that it's okay to do so. Wow. It is okay. And not really sacrificing yourself at the expense of someone else like you.
Yeah, we really have that in our marriage. To be honest, like when people are around and they encounter us, we are so real and so transparent. And if you lived with the Hardys for one day, it would shock you how much radical honesty we practice. It's like, hey, can you go do such and such? No, I'm not going to be able to do that because, and I mean, straight, I don't have the capacity to do it right now. I'd love to be able to make that happen for you, but in this moment, I cannot. Like, we are that direct and it helps us, it makes us healthy. So anything else for radical honesty?
Well, I can see it in you though, when you talk about that's how you, even operate. The intimacy that you must have. And honestly, I was going to say after we stop recording, the way that you look at one another when the other is talking with such love, with such respect, with such reverence, that is created because of radical honesty. That is created, the intimacy is just apparent, right? And I'm sure the same with your children. I know that my daughter and I, we are so close because we have real conversation. Like, we are radically honest. If she's like, if I put some on, she's like, girl, that ain't it. Right. Like, and the same thing, like, she's like, mom, I'm like, yeah, no, that's not you. That's not you. Or he ain't the one. Right. That's why we can have such amazing relationship. Imagine how our partnerships, our romantic relationships, our friendships, like any relationship that we have in our life, how much more potent it could be if we were just being radically honest and not assuming that we were protecting people by lying to them or that by deceiving them, somehow we were doing them a favor. We're not doing ourselves a favor and we're not doing anyone else a favor. And something that I have really learned in this practice over the last few years in particular is that true power comes from honesty with yourself and then honesty to others. Like, if you can, that is true power. If you can tell people what you genuinely think, and this has been a practice. Someone I was talking to recently said, I had a live event for Redefining Wealth just last month. And a couple people who used to work for me came to the event, paid, came, showed up, had a good time, all the things. And they said, I've never seen someone fire people throughout the years, and then those people still want to be in your presence.
That's not good.
Like, pretty much out of every person I've ever had to let go, terminate, dissolve the contract, whatever, 90% of them throughout the years, different businesses, all the things, still check on me, send me a happy birthday text, look out for me. And some of those they weren't ready for me to say what I had to say. But I wish I still had my phone on, received a text message from someone that I released from my team a year ago. And about a month or so ago, I read it on stage at the event. She sent me a text message and said, "Thank you for being so honest with me, because it shifted something in me. It made me go pursue what I was really being called to do, because I was trying to hold on to an old identity. And you being honest with me, like, helped me focus. And this year has been my best year." She sent me all of that's what you have the power to do when you are not attached to being liked by everyone, or to all this, like, oh, what are they going to think? What are they going to feel? Not my business. My business is to be radically honest with you, so that because liberation is not one-sided. When I liberate myself to tell the truth, I liberate you to tell the truth. And that's the thing that we get to with radical honesty, right? Is that it's freeing for us and it's freeing for them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like it really becomes a gift. Radical honesty is a gift. When I give you truth, that's really one of the highest gifts that I could give you, is to give you my truth. And then truth that, the Bible, now we about to preach, it tells us the different variations. Well, some say the truth will make you free. Some say it will set you free. But we know that freedom is attached to truth. And that when truth is not present, it creates a lot of bondage that we get stuck in situations we don't want to be in. We get stuck in a prison within ourselves that we cannot emerge from. I mean, I feel like we almost have the title for this episode. You gave us radical honesty. It's a beautiful subject matter to explore. I want to go here though, and because I think this is a beautiful conversation to have as well. You have integrated your faith all up, down, and throughout everything you do. And in a time period where there is this push to say, okay, if you're going to emerge to the highest levels in which you can go, then you need to remove this piece because you don't want to offend. I love that you're audacious. It's like, listen, my faith is a part of me. It is me. If I'm going to give you all of me, I'm going to give you that too. And you are very unapologetic about that. There are people who are listening, and obviously some of our listening audience, they are people of faith. We recognize that some may not be, and we don't necessarily push our faith on anyone, but we're going to be who we are. We are pastors, okay? We pastor Love Alive Church in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, soon to be in New Orleans and in other places very soon. So that part of us is not hidden. It's never hidden. It can be hidden. It's a part of who we are. Talk about that, like how you reached a place of saying, my faith will absolutely be a part of my journey and who I am, and encourage those who are listening, who are struggling and saying, I'm not certain I could become all that I can be if I allow that to be present, because you are audacious with yours. So talk about how you allow your faith to be a part of every aspect of your purpose.
Yeah. I remember 2014 speaking at an event where they asked me to speak twice. So I had like a morning session and an afternoon session. And in the first session, I referenced God a few times. I referenced the scripture, Proverbs 17:16, because that is my Genesis. Like, that's my origin story. That is so much a part of why I am who I am and why I do what I do. And so they were like, oh, it was awesome. People loved you, blah, blah, blah. But for the next one, could you not say, because we don't want to offend. And I was like, okay. So I tried to digest it, and I'm like, okay. And it made sense in my head, right? What they were saying. It's like, there's several hundred people there. It wasn't a Christian event, obviously. So to be mindful. And I said, okay. And I did the second talk. And for me, it didn't feel authentic. For me, it didn't feel aligned. It was missing a lot because I was policing myself. And I remember having a conversation with God, like, if I got to do all that, I don't want it. Like, if I have to police myself and not genuinely be who I am, I don't want it, because faith is such a big part of who I am. And I'm not coming to offend anyone, but I'm also not going to offend and deny what I know is true for me, because this is how I started. And so what I learned over the years was, I'm not a pastor, right? I don't feel called in the same way to convert anyone or bring anyone, but I do feel called to be honest about my journey. And so, because I have to be honest about my journey, what I've learned to say over this last decade or so is, I'm referring to a scripture, or I'm referring to this as a still small voice, but it could be a quote to you. It's a great quote. Take it or leave it, So whenever I quote scripture, when I'm speaking somewhere that is not faith-based, I always say, write it down as a good quote, as you would any other quote, but just get the message, get the point, right? A lot of my listeners are not Christian. A lot of my listeners are not Christian. And what I love about that is, to me, that's the true test, is you can feel my heart, you can feel my love for people, and you can receive my words without feeling like I'm trying to beat you over the head with a Bible, because I'm not. That's not what I'm there to do. But I will not deny my own experience, because, and I've said this on my podcast many times, the wisdom that you receive to me, I receive as downloads in that prayer room. I receive when I read my word. I receive when I'm journaling. I receive when I'm meditating. It's only fair for me to tell you where it comes from. Now, how you want to apply it and what you want to do with it, again, I'm not attached to necessarily what your takeaway is, because I just feel like God is calling me to be obedient. And so when I stand on stage, or when I get on a camera, or when I do something, I'm just being obedient to the fact that this was my experience. And if I'm going to be radically honest, like, I have to be radically honest. This is just what it is for me. And I feel that it's been well received. People have asked me before, do you feel like you miss out on opportunities because you are so open about your faith? What is there to be missed? Like, that's not a miss for me. What is there to be missed? To be in a space where I have to police myself and not be myself? No, that's not a win for me. It's not a win for me to say, oh, you were on such and such a stage. I was on somebody's stage, but I couldn't be honest about who I am and where the wisdom that I have comes from. That's not a win for me, just because they have tens of thousands of people there, or millions of listeners, or millions. It's never a win to be inauthentic in my book. There's no win in that for me. I don't want it. This is chase purpose, not money. This is not, chase people, chase fame, chase agreements, chase approval. This is chase purpose, not money. And I'll tell you, some of the biggest opportunities that I've received in my career, some of the biggest platforms that I've been on, the interviews that I've been on where I had millions of downloads, verifiable, or views on YouTube, those people are atheists. And they love me. The people who host the show are atheists. They love me and I love them. They're dear friends of mine now. People who've given me opportunities to, speak at their schools all over the country, 30, 40 schools across the country, atheists. And they still listen to me speak and listen to me say my scriptures and listen, because they know my heart. They feel the energy. They still feel the love. They don't feel judged. They don't feel condemned. They don't feel like I'm using my faith and weaponizing it against them. They don't feel any of that. They just like, man, that's Patrice's story. Wow.
So it's like radical honesty leads the way in everything for you.
Yeah.
It's the foundation, it feels like, for all of your flourishing. It's how honest can you become with yourself about who you are, where you want to be, what it will take. It's how honest you can be with others about who you are, what you're doing, what you're going to bring to the table. And I love what you said about authenticity. It's like, she could tell you, I love authenticity. I'm like, whatever that is, like, I can take it, but I can't take the fakery bakery. I don't like the fakery bakery. It wears me out.
I mean, we talked about this on Sunday. Well, the Sunday before last, when we were talking about, we did a series called Escape Room, where you're escaping different things. And one of the message series titles was Escape False Identity. Mm-hmm. And we talked about how when you are your most authentic self, that's when you're most successful, when you are just being who you are. And I mean, if you're trying to be someone else or be something that you're not, you're never going to be as successful. You're never going to be natural at doing that. But when you're who you are, that's when you are your very best self and your most successful. So I know, listen, Patrice, I know you said that you were 42 years old, and I'm like, 42 where? Because you look fabulous.
Come on.
Black
don't quack.
So I wanted to ask you, what advice would you give to your younger self?
The advice I would give to my younger self is to practice radical honesty from the beginning. I would tell her your feelings are valid. I would tell her to not prioritize other people's information over her own intuition, because that intuition is God given. That is the Holy Spirit inside of her that is leading and directing. And she never needs to feel like, oh, I have to give anyone the benefit of the doubt. Like, no, you don't. That's not necessarily true. I would tell her to deal with people based on what she knows, not what she hopes, because creating that idea of like, oh, well, hopefully they'll do, waste of time. And I would tell her to never stop dreaming, like always be willing to dream a new dream, because how you lead in one season is not how you're going to lead in all seasons. And it's okay for that to shift. Just ride the wave, embrace it. Because the more that you try to fight it, the harder the journey becomes. So if you just kind of stay in flow and remember that nothing is happening to you, it's all happening for you, then you can also be willing to embrace when a season is up with grace.
How in the world are you going to drop those kind of bombs at the end of an interview? I'm like, oh my God. Like one of them that just, I had to sit back.
It was I don't know which one.
She said, wait, don't prioritize other people's information above your intuition.
That was good.
And then I may be remixing this when she said, I guess when you see people like go with what you know and not what you hope.
Oh, that was good. Oh.
I'm like, wait a minute. You just had 2 additional conversation starters and we trying to land the conversation. You know, it speaks to how rich the wisdom is on the inside of you. And that resonates, by the way, just so you know, like, and my wife can tell you this, I talk about this all the time. Since I was a little boy, I prayed for wisdom. When I read the story of Solomon had access to a lot of things, but then God's like, I'll give you anything. Ask me. Yeah. And Solomon looks out with what he has, with what he could ask for. He could ask for money. He could have asked for more houses. He could ask for, we know he had a lot of women. I mean, he could have asked for a lot of things. All right. But Solomon says, give me wisdom. And what I love about wisdom, I tell people, wisdom helps you to retain what you've attained. A lot of times we can go get something, but if we don't have the wisdom to keep it, it doesn't really matter. You know, what I looked at is, you know, a lot of people, they forfeit opportunities for wisdom. You know, I don't have to fail to learn every time. Sometimes I need to look at somebody else's journey and say, okay, you know, I have journeys a lot of times with people who have failed at things. And I'm like, tell me what happened. You know, like, I don't want to make you uncomfortable, but I want to know what not to do. You know, so you've left us with so much rich wisdom. And I know that there are those who are listening. They're like, I need to find this woman. I got to follow her. Can you tell our audience how to get connected to you? Because I know you're in multiple places and spaces. Tell them how they could get connected to all things Patrice Washington, because listen, this woman is going to bless your life. I know you've heard through this interview. Tell them how they can get in touch or follow what you have going on.
Yeah, you can definitely stay in touch by also coming over to check out the Redefining Wealth podcast. So we're definitely having more of those conversations about radical honesty, because I don't believe you can redefine wealth for yourself until you get radically honest about what you need, want, and desire and where you are in life. All things Patrice Washington, live at patricewashington.com. And I am so easy to find on YouTube and Instagram at Seek Wisdom PCW.
There you have it. Listen, Patrice, this was a phenomenal conversation. I know it is not the last one that we will have. It's the first conversation. You blessed us with so much wisdom on today, and we're so glad that you chose to be a part of the Grow Black Leaders podcast. We want to thank all of you who have tuned in with us on today. We recognize that you could have spent time doing a number of different things, but you gave us a part of your day. We hope that you were enriched by this information. Again, it is our goal to make sure that you are growing in your leadership. We've created this space for Black leaders to cultivate Black leaders. Until next time, continue growing, continue flourishing, and continue leading.
Thank you for tuning in to Grow Black Leaders. Don't let your growth journey stop here.
Be sure to subscribe and visit our website, growblackleaders.com, and follow us on social media @GrowBlackLeaders.